All right, well, welcome back to this episode of After Hours Ag. Today we have the Farm and Ranch Director for KFGO, Sarah Heinrich.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So, Sarah, we usually like to talk about where you grew up. How did you grow up? Why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
So I grew up in central North Dakota, so that would be like just south of Bismarck, Mandan, on a purebred cattle and small grains operation. Mainly, I was going to say corn, wheat, and beans, but it was more like wheat, barley, durum, and those type of things growing up. We were really big into the purebred cattle, and so the cattle operation was always first and foremost. And then went to NDSU for egg communications and married my husband, and now we farm just north of Medina, raising corn, wheat, and beans, and continuing on that purebred cattle operation as well as a feedlot.
Yeah, so you're still involved with your dad?
Yes.
Out in Mandan as well?
Yes.
Okay, and so have you merged the two? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
So we had the opportunity. So my mom and dad started the purebred cattle business 42 years ago now. And so we actually transitioned the bull sale and the production sale to Richie and I's yard. And so my husband and I are, I guess you could say, that next generation, that next phase of the operation. And then we run a large cow herd, and half of them are in Medina and half of them are in Mandan. And then they're on the same mineral program, feed program. Everything is the same, when it comes down to ultrasounding, you name it. And then we run the bulls and the steers at our house, put those bulls into the production sale. Replacements are over in Mandan, and so it's been able to work out pretty nice, actually. We run a lot of cows back and forth on I-94.
I was just going to ask that. How much running back and forth are you doing?
A lot. I mean, It's like probably 2 or 3 days a week. Somebody's in Medina or somebody's in Mandan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that does sound like a lot. So, when did you know you wanted to go into farming, or go back into farming? Was that always kind of like that was always the goal?
That was always the goal. So I grew up with 3 girls, and I was the only one who was really interested in production ag. Both of my sisters went on to become doctors and very successful, and I was always interested in coming back. And my dad said, go get a job. This will be here when you come back. And my uncle L. Gustin, did egg broadcasting for 45 years. And I thought he had an awesome job, and he was able to go to work in the morning, and then he was able to farm in the afternoon. And so then I just kind of was laser focused in my education and said, that's what I want to do. And I had a shot at it in TV broadcast for 8.5 years in Bismarck. And then once I moved to Medina, which is 70 plus miles out of Bismarck. This position came open to work remotely for KFGO Radio, and I was grateful for the opportunity and have been there ever since.
That's awesome that you can do both things at once,
right.
and honestly, just following in your Uncle Al's footsteps. So what kind of mentorship was he able to provide as you were, was that a thing where you were getting on the radio at all when you were younger? How'd you kind of get your start into that?
He did bring me into the radio station and gave me a tour and showed me how he cut up a story and whatnot. And I remember when I was starting fresh and he sent me a story and how it was supposed to be written, just to kind of give me some guidelines and basics. And so much appreciative of that. I saw his schedule and I thought, you know what, that's something that I could do. I was also really interested as a kid in news anchors and weathermen. And so I was like, I must have just always had an interest in broadcast. What do they do for the rest of the day? How do they get that on air? And so I always had that interest and focus. And then it just kind of streamlined from there. And I took a reporting position at KX News in Bismarck. And I was doing egg stories there, and then started into the radio broadcast as far as just farm broadcasting, and it's been a blast. I love my job. I love what I do. I'm on the road 2 or 3 days a week, I always say, and then I'm in my office 2 or 3 days a week. So I'm always out and about at a big iron, a farm show, visiting with a farmer, at an elevator, talking to him about, how's the wheat that's coming in. And so every day is different. Yeah,
you've been involved in ag for a long time, and I don't know if you remember the first time I met you, but I'm pretty sure I met you in FFA.
Oh, I bet you're right.
I'm pretty sure we did, because you were from Mandan.
Right.
And so you've been involved in ag all this time. What events did you do in FFA?
Livestock judging, extemporaneous speaking. I did some dairy judging and horse judging as well. Not as good in those, I shall say. Those were more of a struggle when it came to judging dairy cows and horses, just because I come from a beef production background. Those were probably the big 4 that really stuck out, were those contests that you just love to do and love to go to. I will credit the blue and gold and 4-H for my job position and they are such great building block programs to, present yourself and just get out there and do some public speaking. And I just have so much gratitude to both of those programs. They are so great.
Oh, for sure. For those of you that aren't familiar with what livestock judging is, you're not just picking out which one is the best.
Right.
You go in there and you put them in an order, and then you come up with a convincing argument to give your reasons to judges, and you need to be convincing as to why. I mean, there's a more or less right and wrong. They give you some leeway on maybe if they're close, but there's a right and a wrong, but you have to come up with very convincing argument as to why or why not you place these 4-1-2-3 or 2-3-1-4. I did it for about 2 years, and I really wasn't very good at the judging aspect of it. I was fine at the reasons, but they weren't very good reasons. So my events were always farm business management. I'm pretty good with math, so
Sure.
So I did pretty well at that, and egg sales.
Okay.
was my other good one. So.
Very fitting for your occupation.
Yes.
I always said that I was an ag communications major for a reason because there wasn't a lot of math or science involved, right?
Nice. And then there was Adam who had a watch calculator on his wrist.
Yes, we talked about that on the drive home. We were talking about what our kids would have for a cell phone or things like that. My kids are 12 and 10 right now, and they just have this Gab phone. And we were talking about the Gizmo, and then we started talking about a calculator watch. And I'm like, of course I had one of those when I was little, right? My uncle had one, and I'm like, I gotta have one, And of course my parents are like, well, you're not always gonna have a calculator on you.
Yeah, boy, were they wrong.
Boy,
right?
were they wrong. I've got a scientific calculator on me at all times now. Yeah.
Before we get too far ahead, I want to know about what is your earliest memory of on the farm as a kid?
Oh, growing up and hauling straw bales, those square bales by far. I mean, I was one of those kids that they would set something on the seat so that I was tall enough to steer, and then Dad would be throwing in bales on one side, and then Uncle Al would be throwing bales up on the other side, and they would literally jump in and turn the steering wheel a little bit this way or a little bit that way,
wow.
so that I could hold it in between the lines. Because we needed help. My older two sisters were in school, and so you just didn't have a lot of help, and so just make it work.
So they would jump on while it was running then, and
right,
okay,
the 2 mile an hour or whatever, and they'd step on the step and turn it this way or
right,
that
my
way.
dad did the exact same thing where we were hauling bale. We would haul big round bales.
Sure.
We never had the small bales.
Okay.
Until I was done and my brother decided to bring on sheep. But yeah, he'd put it in gear, get it rolling, jump off.
Yep.
Get his tractor race ahead of me, jump back on.
As you inch down the field,
Right.
Yeah.
So scared that I was going to run into a slough that was a half mile away.
Right.
Yeah, of course, 5-year-old things, right?
Right, but good core memories.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I mean, such a work ethic is built out there because everybody has to work together and help out. And we have 4 small kids now, and it's the same thing when they ask why we're doing this, and I'm like, because this is what puts shoes on your feet and food on the table, and why we buy tennis shoes for school. It's because this is our livelihood, and we all get to work together at making it happen.
Right.
It's funny how far it's come, because I watched Sunny Farms YouTube video from yesterday, former podcast guest. So if you want to go check out Cole and Sunny's podcast, but they were hauling bales, but Cole had the pickup, and he had a trailer attachment that would haul bales, and then his dad had the tractor with some forks on it, and man, were they cooking. But then you say, it used to be just hand throw, things have come a long way, I think.
Things have come a long way. And we only did square bales for the barn. I mean, truth be told, it was the big round bales like what you're talking about for, 99% of the feed. But we did do small small square bales for in the barn during calving season.
Yeah. Yep. You got to have that stuff. And yeah, for cattle, it doesn't, for the most part, it doesn't make sense to have little square bales. Maybe for your calves and like you said,
everything
in the barn.
has grown on such a large scale. I look compared to how we feed cows now to compared to how we were feeding cows when I was growing up. Whether you're looking at the loader bucket, we didn't use a TMR wagon back then, and now everything is on a TMR wagon. When I think about the little 8N Ford tractor that I started driving on, and now, my kids like Luke and Jake, these are large pieces of equipment, and so it's a totally different learning game. Ours was all steering, putting it in gear, and now it's more can you run this computer, you know? And so things have advanced in just astronomical ways.
Yeah, that you're exactly right. They really have progressed. Let's go back to your time on TV.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember this a little bit. What kind of got you into TV, or how did you land that job, and what were you doing on TV?
My dad said that I needed to get a job when I graduated from college because the farm was always going to be there, and my mom as well. And they both encouraged me to like go just try something, and then if you just don't like it, you know, you can always come back and raise cows. It's always going to be here. So then this reporting position came open at KX News, and I didn't have a reel, I didn't have video, I had nothing, but I did have the courage to walk in and sit across from this general manager and say, I would like to get started in TV. I'm an egg communications major. I have a real interest in agriculture, and I would love to do egg broadcasting for you. And they said, this girl's from Bismarck. Let's give her a try.
Wow.
You know?
Yep.
And so they hired me on, and so kudos to the Wrighton family for doing that for me. And what started as a general reporting position turned into they said, this girl loves egg, let's just let her do it. You know, people were calling in and saying they liked the farm stories back on TV. And so
Did they have an egg team?
no,
Or no?
they did not.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I literally started as general, and I was going to like blood drives and those kind of things. And if you set up your stories for the day, you get to pick what you do. And so I was calling farmers and being like, hey, can I come out and ride in the combine with you? And people were loving it for the viewership. And so then they just said, let's just let her do it. And so that's how I got my start in egg broadcasting, and then turned into a noon show anchor in egg broadcasting, and truly loved it. Like, TV was great. Radio was wonderful as well. Both jobs I have thoroughly enjoyed. Very different, as he can attest, because he has dipped his feet into the radio world as well. Very different, but also very similar at the same time.
Yeah.
Now-
That sounds like a lot of fun just going around. I mean, it sounds similar to kind of what we do with this is you're just telling somebody else's story.
Yeah.
You know?
And I just really, truly enjoyed that. I
Yeah.
loved being able to tell people, like, you know what, this farmer, how that the yields were doing up in Washburn, or like if there was I never liked doing like the hailed out stories or whatnot, but those stories need to be told too, because that's why we have, you know, farm programs in place for when natural disasters like that happen. And so I have just always truly enjoyed every aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think. Do you remember? I think a lot, especially with radio, is that radio is at its best when something bad happens.
True.
You know?
We all pull together and make it happen.
Do you remember, you know, even from TV or radio, some of those stories that really stick with you? Obviously, you know, maybe you don't remember the stories that, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people remember the fun and happy stories, but what are some of those, you know, maybe some fun and happy stories where you think, you know what, I think my story made a difference?
Oh, like the one that sticks out bigger than big is when the Missouri River flooded. And so when we had the flood in Bismarck, Mandan, I was literally on the Grand Marsh Bridge driving home with a load of cows, and my boss called me in on a Saturday afternoon. I was hauling cows out to pasture, and he said, you need to come in. He's like, this is huge, and we're losing homes along the river. And so ran the trailer home, ran the cows home, got back into the office, and we just lived at the office for like a solid 10 days because nobody knew where anything was headed next, and telling like those farmers stories along the river who were like losing all of their land, and they had water in their buildings or in their equipment. And I mean, those stories, that's etched in your mind very, very vividly.
Yeah, my parents-in-law actually are in Bismarck too, and so we went out and nobody even knew where to sandbag.
Right.
You know, it was like, is it coming up to our place? Is
Right.
it not?
Nobody, there were so many questions.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember our news director saying. Like, I don't remember, he said something in the standpoint of, I don't know what this is going to all entail, but he was like, this is going to make history for the Bismarck Mandan area, and it certainly did.
Yeah. I didn't get to ask you one question on your FFA. I was curious, did you ever win an event? Did you ever get the baby bison?
Livestock judging.
You did.
Of course.
You did. What year?
Oh, my. I'm going to say like 2002?
Okay.
I think it was 2002 when we went
Okay.
to nationals, and so that was the year that I won. I always say like it was cows and talking, right?
Yeah.
Like those are two things that I both
Yes.
like. So
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, the kind of sad thing about it, but also it's good, that people may not realize about winning that award and then your team winning, is now you can't compete in it anymore.
that's right. Then you get kicked
Really?
out.
Then you get kicked out. Yeah, once you win it all, then you win it all for the state.
Right.
You can't come back and compete as that anymore.
Someone should tell that to the Kansas City Chiefs, I think.
Yeah.
How about that? Don't come around here anymore.
Right, those NDSU bison.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Right. Yep. Yeah. We talked about FFA. We talked about you growing up. If somebody wanted to, if we're talking to somebody who has a kid or a younger person is listening to this, maybe 17, 18, and they're thinking, I'd really like to get into broadcasting in some way. What would you recommend they start doing at 16, 17, 18?
Get involved. You were talking about FFA. Get involved in those extemporaneous speaking, memorized speaking. Get involved in those classes where you have that chance to enhance those public speaking skills, like so that you gain that confidence to present yourself in front of somebody else. Also, I would say if you are interested in doing like an internship or you want to know more, reach out. He can attest to this. We have had numerous young people come through the radio station that are interested in it. And guess what? It's a great chance to get your feet wet to find out like if you want to do this or if you don't want to do this. To graduate college, I needed an internship. Which I thought was so silly. Like, I don't want to do an internship. We all know that, that's probably not like your bucket list thing is to do an internship. So I took a PR internship. And it was wonderful because I realized that's not what I want to do with my life. Right?
Yes.
But I mean, like, whether it is what you want to do or whether it isn't what you want to do,
You'll figure it out.
Looking back, I'm like, glad I had that because I realized, like, that wasn't my forte, I guess you should say. Like, I wasn't interested in design and all of those things. So I would definitely say, hey, if you're interested in broadcast, give us a call at the station. We would love to, show you around, give you a few tips, whatever. I mean, job shadow for a day.
No matter how big the place is, whether it be KFGO or wherever, like Care 11 in the cities, they're struggling too to find good people. So if you just are hungry and you want to do it, just go and, there will be something for you there.
And I think you would agree. Like, if somebody gave us a call at the station and said, hey, can I just come job shadow for a day? We would be open to that. Like, we would be open to showing you, like, this is the equipment. This is what we do. This is what a normal day looks like, which can change at any given moment. But, like, this is pretty much the standard.
Yeah, I think that really carries over for almost every major, why dump 4 years into something and realize you hate it?
Right.
I did something very similar for civil engineering. I started into civil engineering, went through my first year, got an internship in Jamestown, which is 30 miles from Medina, so that's great.
Yeah.
And I lasted 4 weeks because I just could not stand what we were doing.
Right.
It just wasn't for me.
Yes.
So then I promptly went in and changed my major to mechanical engineering, which was,
more interested
fit a little
in.
bit better.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So definitely get your resume out there, throw it out like it's parade candy is what I always say, and get yourself an internship. Funny enough, I actually did want to go into radio coming almost out of college.
Okay.
Out of high school. And then I realized, I was like, man, I don't know. Do I really want to? It's tough to start making a living in radio. I think that as you get into it further, I think that you can make a lot better living. But when you start, I saw the salary and I'm like, I don't know about that. But I was
Maybe
lucky
stick
enough
to the engineering.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to get to try Thunder Radio back at NDSU. Did you ever try that?
I did not try that, but I was. I knew all about it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Familiar with it.
I realized, so I had a morning show 2 days a week from 6 to 7. I realized how hard it is to just talk on air because I didn't have anybody with me at the time. And everything you do is, or at least most of the things, when you're just talking. I don't think people realize how hard it is just to talk.
Right, so we can have 5 stories. That might be 2 minutes.
Right.
So like when you talk about filling a full hour, oh yeah, that's huge. I mean, that is a lot of content that you need. I always think like even at TV, a great example, we worked all day to fill a 30-minute newscast for different stories that were happening all over. And, you can attest to this as well. We have a newsroom that's working all day for that news content that you're hearing at the top and the bottom of the hour. So, there's a lot that goes into the behind-the-scenes part to make sure that those minutes are filled.
Oh, yeah.
Adam was spinning the classics, right?
Well, I did a little bit of that. I did try to do some talking while I was on, but it was so... I always love the Common Man out of Minneapolis, and he always says he doesn't prepare for his shows. I'm like, how is this even... How is this real? Like, I don't think there's not many people that can do that, but he goes for 3 hours on no preparation, just kind of
Just filling the airways.
he says he's a radio gardener. You know?
Oh my god.
So I really loved his stuff, and I was like, oh, I think I could do that. But after trying it, it's way harder than you might think.
Yeah, there's a lot of work and effort. When people watch TV and think like, oh, I wonder what they do for the rest of their day, or you know, or if you listen to a newscast on KFGO or whatnot, think about, oh, I wonder what they do for the rest of the day. A lot of work goes into prepping this. This guy, used to be my video guy, and he can attest to that. Yeah.
There was, What are some like behind the scenes inside baseball things you can say about radio? Like
it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Like, it's a job where you think that, like, oh, they only work for, like, this many minutes a day, or they're only on from, 8 to 11 or 11 to 2 or whatever. But the amount of work that goes into behind the scenes is just incredible. But it's also a ton of fun.
No, yeah.
I mean, I go to work every day and truly love what I do and have a lot of fun doing it. So then that makes the work a lot more bearable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not so much work then.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you've gone through now, maybe even back into your TV days, how much guidance or how much, I want you to go take this story on. I know we talked about the flood, and that's really kind of a separate deal. But was it a lot of you taking the initiative to say, okay, I'm gonna drum up this lead, or I'm gonna drum up that
very
person?
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
Finding my own contacts, calling my own farmers. I mean, I really reached out to a lot of NDSU extension agents and saying like, hey, do you have a farmer in the area that you think would be willing to talk about, how late we're getting in seeding, or, what the crop is looking like, or if has anybody in your area started harvesting? And they would tip me off to like, yeah, this farmer has started harvesting, give them a call or whatnot. So I leaned heavily on them. But yes, it was my job each and every day to come home with a story, to have a story prepped and ready to go for the 5 or the 6 or the 10 o'clock news. Like, that was my job each and every day to do that.
Yeah.
How has, talking about, as we started this podcast, there's kind of a younger wave of farmers kind of taking over and interested in, consuming this kind of content. Since you started, how has the farmer changed from how was it trying to reach out to farmers, talking to people? How open were they to when you started to now, where it's pretty accessible, I'd say?
Absolutely. So, like, I think about, like, when I started, there were so many more in-person meetings, right? Like, I mean, I would be going to a meeting all the time, whether it was on seeding, cattle, harvesting, like, you name it. I mean, cover crops, like, that was a big thing that came out during my time broadcasting, was the cover crop world. And so there was all these in-person meetings to come and attend and to learn more. And now so much of what we do is webinar and Zoom and, podcasts, whatever it takes to get this information out to farmers, because I feel like the farmer has changed in regards to less in-person. Everybody is on a clock more, busier more, doesn't have time. And so everybody's reading websites now, to learn more. And so I think that just that component in and of itself has changed the farming game so much. Like, we were sitting here beforehand just talking about, like, 4 minutes, and then it's like, and then you realize that you're, I'm on to the next thing, right? And so I think that we're all, like, really fast-paced focused like that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. We were talking before we came on how long people watch a YouTube video, and how we were saying, if they watch 4 or 5 minutes, that's pretty good of a 20-minute thing. And I was the first time we had Rusty on, I was like, okay, I should really listen to more of his, like, directly listen to his, and I was like, everything's like a minute, 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30 seconds. There's lots and lots of those bits in there where it was very short.
Short news clips.
Yep, short news clips. They want to hear what they want to hear, and then
they want to hear the markets, right?
Right.
That's big.
Right. And even if you look at, like, our radio schedule, it'll be like the markets for a minute, weather for a minute, top of the news, national news for 3 minutes, and then we're back into local news for 2 minutes. I mean, it is all so fast paced, because you just have to stay that way to keep everybody's attention, because we're all programmed that way, right? Nobody wants to listen to, like, 60 minutes of something. We all want boom, boom, boom. I want everything I need to know in about 5 minutes of time.
But also, I think there are some people who want... It's so different, because there's some people who want that quick hit, the radios of the world, but also, like, there's people out there watching, like, an hour, 2 hour long podcasts.
Absolutely.
It's like everyone is so different now. It's like you got to find out who your main, audience is, and really, like, capitalize on
Right,
that.
but I mean, if you get in a car and you've got miles to kill and you've got a good podcast rolling, that makes that trip go real fast.
We've had a lot of farmers come out to us here at Big Iron and saying they would see our sign about the podcast and saying, you know what, that's let me look them up because I'm in the tractor a lot.
Right.
And it's like, I think that's kind of our main thing. To not only they're busy during the day, they need to, in the tractor, they need something to listen to. Either it's KFGO radio or maybe it's an interview on After Hours Egg podcast, but something to pass the time when they're and I think that's one of the reasons we started this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely connect with people, tell people stories. Who better to tell your story than you, right?
Absolutely. I've always said that about agriculture. If we don't tell our story, no one's going to tell it for us. I'm a firm
somebody
believer
else
in
will
that.
tell something
That's exactly
negative.
something we don't want. Yeah.
Yeah.
My husband is a big one who follows you guys on YouTube. And so he wanted to give you
Shout out
compliments.
Richie.
Shout out
wanted to give
Richie.
you compliments on the Montana segment. He said,
All
he's
right.
like, talk to me. That was so good. So.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So it's funny though. So I met Sarah in high school, and Richie I went to school with.
Yes.
So Richie's 2 years younger than I am. We played basketball and baseball, and we actually drove down to football together quite a few times.
Oh, I suppose because you had to play for Jamestown.
We had to play
right.
for Jamestown. Yep. So he and I drove in together. I think it was just 1 year we drove together, but yeah, it was. I've known Richie, since we were really little. So. But I mean, it's Medina, right?
Right, small town.
As a senior in high school, I still knew who the kindergartners were. So
How many did you graduate with?
there was 13 of us.
13. Okay,
Yep.
Richie graduated with 7.
Wow.
Was it really?
Yeah. It was very
Oh, I didn't
extremely
realize he
small
was
class.
quite that low. But yeah.
And
7.
now it's booming.
Yeah,
It
We've
is.
got all sorts of students out there. It's
Well,
awesome.
They bring a whole bus out, right?
Right.
From Jamestown?
Yeah, and so we are busting at the seams, and enrollment is good, and so that's pretty cool. I mean, my kids obviously go to Medina, and they have bigger class sizes now, and it's really fun to see just that growth and explosion. And
How many kids are in your kids' classes?
I would say that like 20 to 15 would catch a lot of the classes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Yep,
nice size classes.
Yeah, nice size classes for sure. Yeah, we were talking with August Heipel and Jeremiah Heipel the other day, and I was like, man, I feel like this generation that has moved back and moved into Medina, I think that kind of this revitalization you talk
They brought
about.
a lot of energy with them.
Yeah, lots of energy. It's like, and I was thinking about this last night, and I was like, I wonder why that is. How did this generation? Give me your take. Why do you think that? Because you look at the Medina Mercantile, and you look at now they have the farmstead.
Right.
And,
We've got a great coffee shop and a daycare.
Yeah.
And-
Why do you think that this is going on now, and it really didn't happen 20 to 30 years ago?
Because I think our generation wants that. I think that daycare is so critical to keep families there because we all are searching for it, right? Everybody needs help with childcare. Like our generation loves the coffee shop, right? Like that is a huge thing for us. And I just think that we want that community involvement and that, we've got these kids that are growing up here and we want that community feel, right? Like I think that as a generation, our age, everybody just kind of wants that inclusiveness.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a pretty good take. I think that like my grandma, they always had like Ladies Aid or whatever it was, and they had that.
And
I
things
wonder
maybe
why,
went away for a
yeah.
little while, and now I feel like there's definitely that resurgence of connectiveness. Like,
Yeah.
let's do this. Like, and I love those events in the park. My kids love that, and so I am all for it.
Yeah. So I was thinking about your operation now between between Mandan and between Medina. Richie is Chris on the farm too?
He's he's active in the Air Force.
He's active in the Air Force. Okay, but Michael is back
Yes.
though. So has that expansion there between Mandan and Medina, has that kind of been able to open up? Because way back it was Richie's dad, and I believe his grandpa was around for a little while there, but he wasn't around a terribly long time, as long as I can remember. How is that, expansion into merging the two farms, how has that been able to create more space for everybody there?
Yeah, and so we farm with Richie's dad, and so my father-in-law, and then Richie's brother, and so there's 2 boys and Gene on that farm, and so like for Richie and I to be able to take over the purebred cattle industry, that's always been a huge passion for me. I have been in love with those cows since I was a little kid, and so they are far more than just cows to me. Like that has been our livelihood, and so to be able to take that over has been awesome. We pasture a lot of those cows out in Mandan on the grass, and we've found that we just can really excel on our weaning weights out there. There's just a different grass type, a little bit harder grass, and so we find that we calve out a bunch of cows and then we haul them to Mandan and we haul them back, and it's really created a lot of great opportunities, I will say, you know. And so we focus on the purebred cattle side of things, and that's kind of Richie and I's baby with my folks. Gene and Michael have a commercial cattle operation. And as you're aware, you know, to keep 3 families on a farm, like, you just have to diversify and expand and come up with different options and whatnot. And so then we also do some backgrounding for some commercial calves as well. And it's been really, really good. I mean, I have a huge emotional attachment to the purebred cattle operation. I always grew up wanting to have a bull sale and continue that on. And so to have the opportunity to be able to do that, to me, that's like a dream come true. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity. Yeah,
that's so cool that you've been able to dig in there and really pursue both passions.
Right, absolutely. You know, the grain farming, they really go hand in hand, and it's nice to be diversified, especially on like a down commodity year. You know, and the cattle market, it isn't always glorious either. And so to have that diversification is really, really nice and key.
Mm-hmm.
So is it just you and Richie working? Do you have some workers on the farm?
We have Jeff, and I need to give a big shout out to Jeff. Jeff is our hired guy, and it's Gene's cousin, and he is great. He is super dependable, and he is awesome. And so every day Jeff comes out, like, even if it's blizzarding, like, Jeff will be there. And so, yeah, I've got to give a shout out to Jeff. He's fantastic.
Huh. So talk about, like, what is it like to say it's that 30 below? And, you know, I think some people, especially that aren't from livestock community, maybe a big city,
right,
wouldn't even dream about going out in the 30 below cold to
it's miserable,
to take care, or I mean, just to leave their house maybe.
Right.
But talk about sometimes when it's that 30 below, but you know, you got to go out there and they're your family almost, right?
Absolutely. So those cows get treated extremely well, shall we say, you know. And I mean, we do try to prepare for the cold snaps to make it better so that we aren't out there all day in it. But I mean, so you have an animal out there and it's either going to eat or it's not going to eat, and it's all dependent upon if you're going to go out there. So of course we're going to go out there. It just makes everything harder. You know, like, nothing wants to start. The hydraulics are all super slow going up and down. Everything takes longer. You're usually pushing snow. The water's froze up, so you got to get that going again. So, I mean, like, where we live in this northern climate, it is wild compared to, like, what you hear from, like, you know, the Midwest or the southern states. And we've grown up with it, and we don't know any different, and so that's just what we do. But a lot of chopping ice so that cows can get water, a lot of feeding cows because obviously their energy requirements go up, and so we're feeding more. And I mean, it's brutal. It's brutally cold. But I mean, we complain, but I think about, like, my dad on, like, an open cab tractor back in those days.
Burr.
Right. And they used to go out and do it, you know? So I'm thinking, like, I probably shouldn't be complaining very much.
Well, August and Jeremiah yesterday were like, yeah, that the couple generations before us, they were a lot harder than us.
Right.
We're pretty soft these days.
We're kind of weenies. You know, we got the climate control going and the podcast going, and so life isn't so bad.
Oh, you don't have to sing to yourself on the tractor because the radio isn't broken.
Right, and you know, they would tell me stories about, like, spraying with an open cab tractor and all of those things, you know. I mean, just, you had to make sure the wind direction was right so it didn't blow on you. And we have things so much easier than what those previous generations had.
We do.
My brother's working for an operation in the west central area of Minnesota, and so he was driving a grain cart, and the tractor he was driving, he told us and Grandpa, you know, yeah, it's fine. It's fine, he said, but it doesn't have Bluetooth. I got to listen to the radio.
And
we're like, okay, buddy, how about it's air conditioning and, you know, so, but yeah, different, it's a different time now.
Sure is. Yeah, everything has evolved greatly, but I mean, I love the industry and I love what we do, and obviously anybody who's listening to this loves it as well, because I mean, you put in long days, early mornings, and sometimes you don't get paid very well for it.
That's right.
But clearly you love what you do.
You do. Well, thanks so much for coming on with us, Sarah. This
Absolutely.
was great.
Thanks for having me.
That was a great conversation. We'll have to have you and your husband on next
All right.
time.
Yeah, we can
And
talk farming.
We will dig even further into your farm and
All right.
and
Sounds
where you
great.
guys have come from.
Richie is we'll be excited to have him on the podcast.
We are very excited to have Richie. Yep, we had the Heipels, and I think we're going to pull in quite a few people from Medina. Of course, that's where
You've
I'm
got
from.
that
so
connection.
I've got lots of connections
We're
around
crossing
there.
off every family name.
We will, and they all have a little bit different story, most Germans, but
Right.
yeah,
Right, but everybody's operation is different.
It is very different. Yep.
Yep.
It's
And-
funny how like north of town and south of town, like they were so different way back anyway. I
Very
mean,
much so.
They
Yeah.
very different soils even, and it's amazing what the interstate cuts off.
Right, and you hit the nail on the head. Just even when you think about like the grazing, the soil, all of it, and it's not separated by that many miles, but very different territory.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for listening to After Hours Ag, and let's keep farmers farming.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of After Hours Ag. If you really enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and helps us grow and helps us reach more people. And remember, there's still a future in farming, so let's get there together.